Hi everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our second session of the Guilt-Free Book Club featuring Teach Students How to Learn by Saundra McGuire. We're thrilled that you can all join us this afternoon to talk about mindset. And yeah, we thought we'd just start by just going around and introducing ourselves, and also if you want to share not only where you work and what your role is and everything, but also just something about your experiences with this whole idea of mindset. If it's relatively new to you, if you've been thinking about it for a while, any associations you have with it, or things you've been kind of thinking about in this vein. So, my name is Josh Luckins, and I work at the Teaching and Learning Collaborative here at the Wentworth Institute of Technology as an instructional designer. And actually, just before our session, I decided to rewatch a Carol Dweck TED Talk. Carol Dweck's kind of the intellectual mother of the whole growth mindset idea. And something that really struck me, she said, learning a growth mindset transformed the meaning of effort and difficulty in the participants of the studies she did in educational context. And she was like, basically, once I taught the students about what this whole idea, like you could have a mindset that was oriented towards not yet rather than kind of the tyranny of, oh my God, I don't get it now, this is bad. The same thing, the same challenge went from being experienced as this like terrible, overwhelming thing that made me either want to give up or cheat or, find somebody who was doing worse than I was, to something where it was actually like, hey, this is cool. I'm going to make new connections in my brain, and it's going to kind of be uncomfortable, but actually it's fun. And so it's kind of amazing how just shifting your perspective can make literally the same thing seem different. So that's my little takeaway for this moment. Yeah, I'll pass it over to Megan.
Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Megan Hamilton Giebert. I'm an instructional designer at Wentworth and Josh's player two, basically, with this whole guilt-free book club initiative. And I have finished reading the book, Teach Students How to Learn. I reread chapter 6 to prep for today. It's a wonderfully short chapter, fairly succinct, and a lot of it does serve as like a promotion to read Mindset by Carol Dweck. And if you haven't read that, that one's quite good as well, and I can recommend it. And what I like most about the idea of growth mindset is how challenge becomes fun. And Josh, you kind of hinted at this a little bit of, when you have a fixed mindset, a challenge is, something to avoid because it might invalidate something about your identity. If you reveal, oh, I'm not actually good at this, I'll never be good at this. But, when you can, have your face light up at the idea of, oh, wow, I can't do this yet, and getting excited about this new puzzle to solve. That's something inspiring I find about it. So I'm going to pass things to Ariel, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. Yeah, so I'm Ariel. I'm also at Wentworth. I'm the Director of Student Accessibility Services and Academic Support. This is maybe going to sound very weird, but when I was reading the chapter, I kept connecting it to Abbott Elementary, which is, again, a TV show and about elementary school and not higher ed, excuse me. But they recently had an episode about gifted education. And when that came up in this reading, I was just like, oh my God, this is the conversation I've been having in my household. What does that label mean? It was something I had when I was a kid and I thought it was really cool. And I've been really questioning, what just kind of like the domino effect of having that label as this like little one and what it's meant moving forward. So yeah, it was weird that this TV show has been jumping to mind, but that's really where I'm at right now with this. So love to talk about it.
Thanks, Ariel. Do you want to pass it off to one of our other
Oh,
friends?
yeah, sure. Rita Marie.
Hey, everybody. I'm Rita Marie Hensley, an instructional designer at Simmons. So when I was reading the chapter, I just kept thinking about how you grow up, what your parents are telling you. And it was pretty much Like for me, it's like, oh, I was never good in math, so I guess you got that gene, right? And then you just kind of pass that. And so it really takes a lot of convincing to get a student to change his or her mind about how they think about classes. And I think instructors, if a professor came to me and said, talked about growth mindset, I think that would make such a difference. But like she said in the book, so many instructors also have the same fixed mindset, because they were kind of, I guess, exposed to it with the green, yellow, blue group of the reading group. Because we were all in those groups. So I just kept thinking about, as much as it's a wonderful way to look at things, the growth mindset, but how hard it is to get people to change what they think of themselves. So I'll just go ahead and pass it on to my colleague, Suzanne.
Hey everyone, Suzanne Edmonds. I'm also an instructional designer at Simmons. And as I was reading this chapter, I kind of went back to, because I used to teach elementary school. And so I kind of went back to what I taught as an elementary school teacher and how I taught and how things kind of manifested. So I taught second grade for about 6 years and I taught fifth grade for 1 year. And being in teaching fifth grade and having those gifted students really helped me see, because they talked about in the book or in the chapter, like how the gifted students are not really being challenged, or they would just put, I don't know, as the answer. And I didn't really have that experience. I felt like the gifted students were bored a lot of the times, even in the gifted programs. And so it really helped me see, as far as like the different mindsets that we can have, growth or fixed. And I feel like I taught some of the strategies, but never really thought about it in a growth or fixed mindset. Having those terms now really helped me kind of see, okay, this is really what I did, and this is why I did it. And maybe I should have changed this, but this part was really good. So it just kind of helped me reflect this, years ago when I was a teacher. So, and I'll turn it over to Tom.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the growth mindset idea is very interesting. I thought this was like a nice kind of summary of it, and I think especially like compelling with some of the examples she gives from like I don't know, like the like vignettes of like the miracle students that she talked about. It's so interesting thinking about. It's like, it's an interesting way to look back on like your own learning experience too, where it's like, I feel like, especially, I don't know, it's been a while since like you've been in school, it's like you can choose not to be maybe pushed out of your comfort zone. You kind of forget what it's like to like be looking at something for the first time. Like, it's kind of nice, like it's a nice exercise as an educator to like just randomly pick up things that are way outside your comfort zone. Like, I don't know, like I don't have much like background in like art. It's like always interesting to think about like even just reading, just closer to comfort zone, like art history, and it's like, oh, this is like all new, right? Like and so I guess that's what I was thinking about. He's kind of, as some of the other people were talking, it's an interesting tool for reflection. I think I don't know, I think an also interesting thing is like, okay, how do you kind of like one approach is maybe to like just talk about it to your students and talk in a way that promotes it, which I think it's easy to fall into bad habits with that, where a lot of our language sort of presumes a fixed mindset. But there's ways, I think, to build it into like the structure of the course, the structure of the resources too.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, everyone, for sharing in such, meaningful and personal ways. I definitely,
You muted.
Oh, funny, so funny. Hey, Zoom. Yeah. I'll try to do all the things at once, trying to put the thing in the chat and also unmute. Fail. Anyway, Megan's gonna edit that out. It's gonna be great. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of those things. When I was listening to you, I also thought about my own experiences, both as a student and as a teacher, and definitely thought of a lot of anecdotes and moments where maybe I could have done better, both by myself as a student and for my students as an educator. So I just put in the chat a link to our collaborative notes document, which Megan and I definitely pre-filled with a bunch of kind of scaffolding that we thought of, and in terms of the chapter, and want this to be a resource for everyone to be able to come back to, but also invite you very much to add your own notes, whether it's quotes from the chapters you really enjoyed or that stuck out to you, or other takeaways or other suggestions that folks can look at in the future. So feel free to add to this as we talk or later, and also feel free to share this around with your friends and colleagues. Megan, did you want to talk us through anything more about that collaborative notes document?
Sure, I'll just go ahead and screen share what it looks like in case you don't have it open, but we have a link to the book available through the Wentworth Library if you want to brush up on the reading in online format. And then kind of our takeaway to share is the 4 strategies that McGuire presents for changing student mindset. And when Tom was speaking, I was kind of reminded of, sometimes the best starting point is just adjusting your language, and trying to overcome some of our language tendencies, that we have to classify people based on their ability and to undermine what the research actually says about growth mindset. So a lot of those strategies relate to language adjusting. Josh and I put in some of our favorite quotes from chapter 6. You are welcome to add your own favorites to this section. We also threw in some takeaway ideas about what you can do, action steps that you could take. Feel free to add yours as well as you think of them. We tried this in the last session, and we do encourage you to use it if helpful too, to identify, based on today, something you could immediately start to implement, what it is, why you are inspired to try it, and how you will implement it. So feel free to use that section as well. And you can also review our notes from our previous session if you'd like.
Yeah, so we also thought so I'm going to try that again. So one great thing about this book, Teach Students How to Learn, is that it's really a concoction of Saundra McGuire's lessons that she's learned herself over 30 plus years of working in higher ed. And I love just the fact that she's really open and honest about her own experiences, starting off as somebody who kind of just was conditioned with those kind of advanced groups and the not yet there groups. And I love this short video that we found. We tried to show it last time, had some audio issues, so we're going to try it again. It's just about a minute long, and it really speaks to her realizations about growth mindset. So I'd love for you guys, as you watch this, just to kind of think about how her own reflections relate to what we're talking about in the chapter and what we were talking about in our own work in our institutions.
All right, and Josh, please stop me if this does not play adequately this time, but we did test it. I'm hoping we've solved it.
Teachers tend to think that if a student has not done well on the first 2 exams, then they probably are not very capable in that subject. I used to think the same thing. If I had a student who flunked the first 2 tests in organic chemistry and they came in to see me, I would want to know, what's your backup plan? I know you thought you were going to be a neurosurgeon, but if you can't pass these first two tests in organic, you obviously are not going to get to medical school. I now no longer believe that, because I now understand what to teach students, how to teach them to focus on the concepts, how to determine whether they understand what they think they understand or whether they don't. And because I've personally seen students go from the 28s, 30s to 80s and 90s in a couple of weeks, now I understand that it's very important to have a faculty member who can instill confidence in the student that they can excel, and they know that the faculty member cares about their success and their ability to really thrive in the course. And I find that when faculty learn about this, they're very willing to try it. And I now get correspondences from faculty all over the country saying, I tried this and I find that students who were failing are now doing very well.
Yay, I'm glad that we sorted out the audio. Big win. So I love that Saundra McGuire's like, I used to believe this and now I no longer believe. I no longer believe it. I believe something else. And I've seen that as a result of what I've observed in my work with students. So just want to open up the floor to you all. What do you think about that? And, have you experienced anything like that? What does that have to do with this theme of growth mindset that she's bringing up in this chapter of her book?
I really love the idea of letting faculty say that to their students, of this whole idea of growth mindset, and how just because you have failed the first two tests doesn't mean that is what you're going to do for the rest of the course. And I think kind of preloading students with that knowledge of, hey, okay, I'll be okay. I can do this. I just need to kind of change the way that I'm thinking or change the way that I'm studying. And I think giving students that capability is huge, because if they don't believe in themselves and they know their faculty member, their instructor doesn't believe in them, they're not going to do very well. It all comes down to one of the quotes in here about beliefs and believing what you are capable of. And I think that is huge. And that is, K-12, higher ed, all the above, even as adults.
For sure. Yeah. And if you find that quote and want to share it, we'd love to hear it. It's always fun to hear what everybody else pulled out of the chapter. So yeah, grab that. And anyone else have other thoughts they want to add, just reflecting on the video and just the fact that it seems like it is possible to teach students how to learn, to empower students with this type of mindset. Any other thoughts to add?
Something I felt this time that I felt with the first chapter I read. I haven't read the whole book. I've just been reading the chapters for these, but I love how open she is in, oh yeah, I used to think this too. I think that is so like humanizing to her students. And it's like, it's not only did she used to think it, she is so committed to this. Now she writes a book on basically the opposite of how she, was taught earlier. Like I find that to be really, really effective for me, because she's not holier than thou. And, oh, I knew this. So, why don't you? It's so I really, really like that. It really endears me as a reader with her work. And I'm sure it has from her like reports, it has a similar effect on her students that she shares that so freely.
Absolutely. And it does seem like our society kind of conditions us into fixed mindsets, just the structure of how education happens. So it seems like this is the type of thing that has to be repeated over and over again and kind of reintroduced and reemphasized in every new situation, every new class, in order to kind of break through what the status quo is, which is probably a little more fixed, unfortunately. I know, Megan, you have a really cool graphic to share with us about this to take us more specifically into it.
Well, it's not my graphic. It's the graphic that was in the book, just in case you haven't had a good chance to look at it. Figure 6.1 on, I think, page 62 does a really good job comparing and contrasting the two fixed mindset and growth mindset. Not only defining what they are, but also identifying how the mindset, the belief can really impact your actions, because it impacts how you view challenges, how you identify and either rise to meet or try to avoid obstacles as they come up. I was struck by how the different mindsets approach effort. A lot of people in the fixed mindset, they tend to see effort as a bad thing. Oh, I shouldn't have to work at this. If I work at this, it means I'm not good at it. Whereas the growth mindset sees effort as an opportunity to improve, that the only way to be able to master a concept. Also, our attitudes and approaches towards criticism, which in the growth mindset, we tend to accept criticism and, learn from it, whereas we are much more criticism resistant when we're in a fixed mindset. In the same way of, interacting with others, sometimes we're threatened by success of others when demonstrating a fixed mindset, whereas we find something useful and valuable in our own growth from the success of others when we have a growth mindset. So I thought this was a succinct way to not only define the two mindsets as they appear, but also identify how people behave differently and demonstrate different things, how the mindsets manifest in action from that belief. So.
And for me, it was also like the ramifications of this one mindset shift are huge. Like the field of possibility can either be relatively closed and your emotional experience of it can be kind of fraught, or the field of possibility can be wide open and your emotional experience of that moment and that learning opportunity can be like really engaged and excited. So just incredible how the same thing can just be, experienced in totally different ways just by kind of shifting how you see it and how you look at it. And empowering with faculty with just this tool to be able to invite students to see their learning in a new light, in a new way. That can be really powerful. And she, as Saundra McGuire and Carol Dweck both share these crazy stories of wild turnarounds in students and groups of students, we see the efficacy of it. Before we move on, any thoughts from you all about this, that have been bubbling to the surface for you?
Well, I was thinking about that probably many students are kind of somewhere in the middle or have a fixed mindset with certain subjects and a growth mindset with other ones. And it's how you get them to have a growth mindset for everything, which would take the instructors, like all instructors, to talk about that in their courses. Because just looking at the graph, it's like, I think some, people are kind of in the middle. Sometimes they'll accept challenges and sometimes they won't, maybe depending on the topic. And, same with feedback or criticism. So that's what I was thinking about.
Rita Marie, that was an amazing segue because that's exactly what Megan and I were thinking about. And we're like, we need to reflect, give ourselves as educators a moment to reflect about this, because it's like in some situations, I've totally been one or the other, and it just is very situational. And a lot of it, I think, comes back to identity of like when it feels like a challenge to my identity as, the person in the advanced group or as someone who's good at English or bad at math, then it really feels like that growth and fixed mindset thing gets activated. So I just want to give us a couple minutes to reflect and share a personal story, if you're willing to, about a time that you felt like you really had a growth mindset, kind of actually, let's start with fixed. Let's start with fixed, because I think it'll be nice to kind of go into the tougher part and then come out of it into the part that feels really good. So think about a moment, in your career, either as a student, as a learner, as an educator, whatever situation it could be. It could be even, doesn't necessarily have to do with formal schooling, but it can, in which you experience yourself upon reflection as kind of, wow, I guess I really had a fixed mindset there about what was possible and, where I was going. So I'll just give, 30 seconds just to think about that. And then we can, if you're willing to share a story, an anecdote, be really neat to hear from folks. Well, I'll be happy to kick us off. I experienced some fixed mindsetness when I was in high school in algebra class, and it was very much like other students kind of got it real quick, and I was like, I don't get it, and I experienced a lot of like agitation and frustration, and it was like, I was good at other subject. Why wasn't I good at this? Why wasn't I getting it? Like, if I'm not getting it now, then I guess I'm never going to get it. Then I guess, catastrophic thinking, and I'm not going to get into college. And, so it was just like this big source of anxiety that like wasn't necessary at all. And, part of it also was that some of the teaching strategies that what we were learning wasn't contextualized at all. And I was just kind of like, I have to do this because I'm supposed to get good grades, because I'm a person who gets good grades, but also like, who cares about this? Whereas like in history class, I was like, this is so interesting. So there was a little bit of that motivation and that kind of context and the why that was missing for me. But I also definitely was stuck in that fixed mindset in regard to me in math. And it lingers to this day. Like when it's like, oh, I got to figure out some math thing and basic algebra would help. I'm like, can somebody help me? Because that's scary. But yeah, that's my little story. Open it up to the floor if anyone wants to share.
I had one that I was thinking about when I was a grad assistant, actually. And so I was a grad assistant in disability services, so the field that I ultimately still work in. But the school I worked at had a design program, as a school of design. And I was very excited. The design school had this 2 days actually, of inclusive design workshops. And I was like, oh, that's so great, because that's like, a big part of what we preach. And they said, you should come. And I thought, yeah, I'll come. And I show up to the room thinking I'm just kind of like, not auditing, but just like, I have no background in design, none whatsoever. And the people in the event I had just gotten at this institution wanted me to join a design team with some of the students. And our goal was to create this like inclusive design, like adaptive tech with user experts. So there were folks who, had specific access needs, and we were working together. And my head was, oh my God, I remember it was just like flames. Like I was like, I can't do this. This is nothing I understand. And it just wound up being so cool. And then our group won like an award in the workshop. I don't feel like I, did a lot in terms of contributing to the like physical design, but understanding their process and just not like truly running out of that room. I was 23. Like I was just like so scared. That they were asking, they expected me to do this thing, and shouldn't I want to do this thing? And like as recently as a little bit ago, I realized it's still on Google. If you Google my name, it's like I'm a design award winner. So it really, changed everything. Now I'm going to use that in my resume. Anyway, that was just a wild moment.
I have more of a personal experience. So it started out in high school when I was a student, and I had the worst history teacher ever. So bad that like he came in and we made one complaint that we were a little warm in the room, and he literally threw his book down and said, "Suffer in silence." I'll never forget it in my entire life. He never taught us anything. He just gave us worksheets, and we all basically just copied each other's. It was terrible, terrible. Fast forward to, I am now married. I have been for a while. And my husband went to visit Gettysburg, and he said, "You really need to go." And I thought, there is no way. Why do I need to go visit Gettysburg? There's no way. I don't care about history. I didn't enjoy it in school. I'm not going to get anything out of it. Well, we went to Gettysburg and fell in love with it. I have learned so much just about the Civil War, Gettysburg in general, all these things, like so much so that we're taking my parents this year. So much so that I actually watch specials on TV now about it, and has even like expanded my interest in history of other areas in America. And it's just so funny, because for the longest time I was like, no, I don't want to care. I don't care. I don't want to know. Don't tell me. And now I'm like, I can't get enough. So it's just interesting to see. I mean, even just in personal, how, and I just think back to, if I'd had a great history teacher, where could I have gone? Could I have maybe taught history, in the classroom? I don't know. I did not have a good experience. And now looking back, I'm thinking in my head, wow, I really didn't get it. And now it's like light bulb.
I mean, the one occurring to me is also kind of similar. It's maybe more on the personal side. I'm just trying to think. But, actually very, very recent, where, recently purchased our first home, and I'm someone that has pretty much identified as someone that's like not handy, I guess, very limited capacity in that regard. And so, but like my father-in-law is like a very, very talented carpenter, and very nicely has been helping us with some of little home improvement projects. And it's like, okay, I have to practice what I preach here in terms of learning. It's not like people are born not, handy or not. So it's I've been trying to make an effort. It's okay, do what you tell your students to do, ask a bunch of questions, try to, it's not like you can't become better at these things. So it's been a nice learning experience. Just, it's nice when someone that already has some level of expertise, and using that as an opportunity to be even in situations okay, this is beyond our ability now. It's could you explain what you're doing as you're doing it? So at least I, kind of understand it. It's definitely been, a good learning experience. And you get reminded too of just how much mental effort it takes, when it's something that's just way out your comfort zone, where in the way that a lot of times when we're teaching stuff, it's stuff that's very used to. So it's a nice reminder of what it's like to be outside the comfort zone and really push yourself to be I need to grow here.
So I have a story of, it's just a few years ago, I guess maybe 4 years ago, I was taking a quantitative research class. And like you, Josh, the math thing, I've always identified as can't do it, completely fixed mindset since I was a child. And since this was just a few years ago, I was very aware of growth mindset. And I was telling myself, this is how you're going to approach this course. I'm going to be open. I'm going to learn some statistics. I'm going to watch every single YouTube video and, just really approach it with that growth mindset. But I did, but what a challenge that was to then reteach myself to accept this challenge and learn this and use all the strategies that I was very aware of. But still that little voice, you can't do this. Statistics, you can't do this, but I don't know. It's just interesting because it's a battle when you've always been told I was not that successful with math growing up. So, it's just a battle.
Well, I'm having trouble picking just one story from the mysterious past of Megan Hamilton Giebert, but I'm hearing elements that I can relate to in all of your stories, in the getting your mindset caught up in your identity, especially of like what Josh said, I'm a person who gets good grades, and what Rita Marie, you said, I'm just not good at math. I'm not a math person. And just trying to wrestle with that, removing the skill from your identity and how much cognitive effort that takes. But what I heard from others about, the transition into the growth mindset of having a champion to help you through it, having a support group who can enable you to start seeing success or find ways to get started with the new challenge. A role model in the form of an in-law or in the form of a teacher who can not only help you with the skills you need in order to improve in that area, but also with the attitude adjustment that comes with it. So yeah, this is wonderful to listen to. Thank you for sharing.
I'm going to cheat and share one more that's kind of related, which is when I was teaching high school English, all of a sudden I found myself falling back just into the patterns of how I was taught, because I was in my first year and it's just kind of muscle memory, And now that I've been, doing all this research and ungrading and, all these different really cool techniques that we learn about as instructional designers and supporters of student success and everything, it's oh man, I could have been looking at things totally differently. And I just kind of, fell back into the way that it had always been done or the way that I experienced it. And I think that that's kind of most professors experience too, like without having some sort of real like opportunity to think critically about what they're doing and why and what other possible ways there could be to do it. They just kind of tend to do it the way that, they were experienced, education. So I think that's one of our challenges and opportunities in our roles, is to kind of bring these new ways of seeing, doing, and thinking into our communities. So now that we reflected on some fixed mindset experiences in our lives, I'd love to give us a chance to just think about and share a moment when you really had that growth mindset and you were like, wow, yeah, that really worked out. And that belief in yourself and in the possibility of growth, and interpreting the stimuli of challenging things as exciting and engaging and enhancing, enriching for you, really helped out. So I'm going to give you a sec just to think about that, and we can go ahead and share as well. Well, I'll kick us off. Also in high school, I also took physics, and because I was on like the honors track in other classes, I got thrown into honors physics, and I was like, I met with the teacher the first. I was like, "Can I do this? I'm not good at math. Whatever. This involves a lot of math." He was like, and he really continuously was like, "I will give you all the extra help you need. I believe that you can do this. I know that you can." Blah blah blah. So he really kind of, without having read Saundra McGuire's book because it wasn't published yet, he kind of was inculcating me with the growth mindset in regard to that particular discipline. And then also there was something about being able to see stuff of like, he would like demonstrate a thing with the tube that made sound, and it was like, well, I could perceive that. Like that's something that I could understand and perceive, and then having like the understanding that what the thing that's happening, that phenomenon in the world that I could understand, I could see with my own ears, that could be described mathematically using like an equation. Somehow I was like able to latch onto that and be like, I'm going to struggle through this thing of X, the X's and the Y's, because I want to be able to make that connection. It just made sense to me. And partially it was just the tactile thing and the application, but partially it was just that support of like, yeah. And again, just going back to the mindset, I just experienced that challenge instead of like banging my head against the wall and why is this terrible, of like, I'm going to figure this out. This is cool. Like, I want to be able to do that thing with the rope and make it make sound. And so that's kind of my anecdote about growth mindset.
I feel like it took a long time for me to get that growth mindset. So I have none of those stories from like earlier education, but something that was pretty recent. I'm currently in a doctoral program, Doctor of Education at Northeastern. And, I don't know, it's been going very well. It's very funny to be, I finished my coursework, but at this time, like getting grades for like, these grades truly don't matter. Like they do not matter. I'm working on my dissertation, this, that, but like, I love getting those A's that go nowhere, that they feel great. And here I am just like confident and a little cocky. And I did an assignment for like a research methods type class, which isn't really my strength, but everything else had been going so well. I was like, that's fine. And there was a template. And I really took the template as a suggestion. I was like, okay, this is guidance. I'm just going to like roughly use this. And I turn it in and I feel great. And I get chewed up. I mean, again, it was like, these grades don't matter. That's not a big thing. The professor was like, why did you say this? Like, why didn't you answer this question? And I think the grade she gave me, I think it was a C. And I never done that poorly in my life and whatever. And this was like, a couple months ago. And I just was like, this isn't over. Like, what did I do? And I like immediately set up an appointment with the professor. I mean, in the past, this would like I would like burst into tears. And I just kind of got the email and I was like, what happened here? And it was like, you should have followed that template. And she's like, go back, follow the template, make all the suggestions that I've put here, resubmit it. This grade will not count. And whatever you get on this resubmission will be great. And I aced it. And I tell everybody in the program who's going into the class, like from the jump, I'm like, follow the template. Hear what happened to me. Hear my story. But it just is so different than how I would have reacted to this earlier in my education. That I was just like a go-getter, and I contacted the professor and we chatted, and she's still like one of my favorite professors. I like update her on all of my academic achievements. So yeah, that was a huge, huge turnaround in my growth mindset.
I feel like some of y'all worked growth mindset success stories into your fixed mindsets. So if you're having trouble tracing to one particular issue, I do like the not the end of the story sort of aspect to your fixed mindset mentality, how it transformed. And speaking for myself, I do know there are still areas of my life that, I'm trying to adjust from fixed to growth. So it is a process, Intelligence is a process, not a thing. That was a quote in the book.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I said before. I mean, it's just this constant challenge too, because it's all these, like you were saying, identities that you have, or all these beliefs you have about yourself. And then you have to challenge them and just remember, I can do this. Just apply whatever strategy works for you, rather than that immediate reaction, like, I can't do this, or, getting a poor grade, that immediate, like you were saying, Ariel, like normally it would be like, no, but then it's like, apply the growth mindset and try to figure it out. So, but it's a challenge because we have these beliefs.
I remember, I think it's interesting too, like how much of it, at least to me, feels like it's related to approach maybe, or I don't know. I remember in college where I was mostly taking, of my science courses, it was mostly physics. And then I would occasionally have to do an elective in chemistry or biology. And my attitude was very much like, I'm like a physics-y type person. Biology and chemistry are just not as interesting to me, and I'm not as good at them. And so at a certain point, I realized it was like when I got a worse result in a bio or a chem class, it's like, wait, but I'm studying for this as if it were a physics test, but this, it's not the, there's just I wasn't recalibrating my approach or my strategies, in part because I knew it's okay, you have to find ways to make this interesting for yourself, and also adapt, right? I know, so it was really kind of eye-opening for me to be okay, well, here I am taking this class, yeah. And so a lot of times, an initial test result, it wouldn't be as good. Oh, right. I was kind of studying for the wrong class when I did it this way. It's not like I'm a physics person that can only study for things in a physics way. It took some growth to realize there's some adaptation involved, and you have to kind of shift your thoughts about yourself as a learner.
So for me, Excel has always kind of made me anxious, just using Excel or Google spreadsheets or any of that. And I feel like now I have actually, I've taken some time to actually go through Google, because the words like pivot table and conditional formatting and data validation, I don't know what any of that means. Now I do, because I took the time to actually sit down and try to figure out, okay, how's this going to work for me? What does this mean for me? And now I actually can create Google spreadsheets with these nice drop down color coded tables that are amazing. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, I can do this. All I have to do is do a little bit more research, take the time, and actually figure out how it's going to work for me and for my team, and actually feel like I've done something, and it's really been helpful for us.
I second that. So helpful because I never make those sheets. You always make them. So
Sorry, I just said that's awesome. Teamwork is the dream work. And also like definitely like even me, like I love doing these podcast interviews, but I'm super intimidated by editing them. And like so Megan and I are gonna sit down and like we're gonna figure it out. She's further along than me. Like and hopefully then like I'll be able to do more stuff and it'll just be better. We'll be able to be a better team. And I believe I'll be able to do it. So anyone else want to share before we move on to our next little section? So something I was actually thinking about, so Carol Dweck is a Stanford psychologist, and there's another Stanford psychologist named Albert Bandura who has this thing called self-efficacy theory, which I think relates really interestingly to what we're talking about. And he's talking about how basically it describes how people's beliefs in their capabilities to exercise control over what's happening in their lives kind of can provide either the foundation for motivation, well-being, accomplishment, or the opposite, right? Negative things. And some of those sources of influence are mastery experiences. So experiences where you get to, try something and feel like you're good at it. And also kind of that social element of how you're interacting with others, like in a classroom, with teachers. And then, finally the real, like how it ties into your emotions and how learning and emotion are interconnected. So I thought that was like a neat, also like educational psychology framework to think about. And another one that I was thinking about in relationship to this work as we transition into the kind of actionable steps part of the chapter that we have in our shared document, maybe we want to start sharing that shared document again, is Lev Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, where he talks about basically, if you're trying to learn something new, either it could be too easy and you're kind of bored and you're like, I already know this, whatever, or it could be too hard and you're like frustrated and it's just not appropriate. But there's that zone, Goldilocks zone, right in the middle where it's, the challenge is just right and you're experiencing it as like, I'm building these neural connections and it's really cool. I'm making connections, figuring it out on my own, but also it's not, too easy or too hard. So, there's ways in which faculty can really build their courses and build their assignments and activities to kind of for optimal growth mindset to be achieved. So here's some of those actionable steps that both Carol, Saundra McGuire, and Megan and I were kind of putting together. One of them is just has to do with language, something we talked about earlier in our chat, but growth mindset language, both in the syllabus itself, the first day of class, really making that clear, and then going forward, kind of repeating that when you're talking with students one-on-one, using growth mindset language in feedback you give to students, written feedback and oral feedback, and then if you use rubrics, using that kind of language in the descriptions of what the rubrics are. So before we kind of move on from that, does anyone else have any thoughts about that kind of how to transition your language to more of a not yet growth mindset oriented language that could empower students to feel differently about the challenges they face in your course?
I love the idea of growth mindset statements in your syllabus, since that's one of the first things students see. Also, a lot of times instructors are encouraged to kind of send out that email before they even get the syllabus or the class begins. I think that's a great place to do some of this language, make that first impression that's very positive, welcoming, get students already thinking that, okay, this class might be good, so I think that's really important.
I think a lot of communication that happens after especially like the first test or first exam, like the first big, where, some of them probably, specifically some of them maybe did poorly. I think a lot of the language that happens then can be really important because it's so early in the semester, not that much has been locked in. And I think, especially when the instructor, approaches that as like, hey, if you didn't get where you wanted to be, like, there's plenty of time, like, and then offering strategies of like, this is how you can improve. Like, I think, using it more as an opportunity for, it's like, this is an opportunity to readjust. It's not a signal that like, this is a class you're bad at. I guess that's kind of similar to what McGuire was saying in that video. But that seems kind of like a key moment communication wise to my perception.
I don't know if that's the most eloquent way to say it in the notes, but I like what you hinted at of, mentioning after the first exam, you still have an opportunity to improve from here. Like use this, grade to move forward with, not to define the ceiling of where you're at.
And that's what Saundra McGuire also talks about, is after that first exam, there might be those students who are like, oh my God, I thought I did well, but I didn't, kind of like Ariel shared in her story. And that's when she likes to introduce these strategies, both the growth mindset and some of the metacognitive kind of learning strategies, when the students will be kind of more receptive to it because they're like, oh, this could help me, and sharing some of those stories of past students' success. So another factor she talks about is just the design of the course itself and the way that you scaffold your instruction and the sequence of events that happens to allow students early moments of success, to give them a feeling of like efficacy and capable, that they're capable and that they get it. And then little by little introducing higher levels of challenge, and also of course introducing different ways for them to show what they know. Something we were hearing from our new faculty is just the need to differentiate instruction, and having a lot of challenges figuring out how to do that, especially in courses where students are coming from really different backgrounds in terms of their where they were at in high school, or some are majors and they're kind of more intrinsically motivated, and some are non-majors. So finding ways to kind of differentiate instruction to learners who are at different, coming in at different places. Does anyone have any thoughts to add about those strategies of both scaffolding and differentiating instruction in ways that encourage a growth mindset?
I can see y'all better when I stop sharing. So
For sure. These
Something
are
something
No,
you
what were
can
you
do
gonna say,
is
Susan?
ask students to reflect on kind of not only how their first exam went, but how they studied for it. And even create like a discussion forum and have all of your students kind of input that. And so if one person studied one way and another person studied a different way, maybe somebody would get something from that.
I love that. Yeah. So not just focusing on the content, but also the how did you get here, and teaching students just the not only the ability to study and succeed in the class, but also in the discipline itself. It's not just about how to write a good essay, but it's about how to be a scholar, be a good, effective reader, critically know. So all these things are kind of more readily transferable outside of the context of the course itself.
Differentiating instruction, my context is thinking about this, especially like math instruction, but I think especially with some of the like more, I don't know, like math, like science stuff, I think it's important to maybe give an on-ramp for students that like the like just like thick, lines and lines of equations can be intimidating. Like I think it's helpful to do exercises where there's like no numbers or equations involved, like something that's a bit more like a discussion or a debate. Like one I did just this week was just like, listed like 4 real life examples, and like, it was like linear regression. It's like, which do you think would have the strongest linear relationship? Which you have the weak? And there's no calculations to be done. It's just trying to think about the math concept, and then your answer is just, this one best, that one worst. And like, it was interesting to see like, some that typically were a little more disengaged got a lot more engaged, and talking with their peers and like the little groups that they formed. So I try when I'm, at least when I'm teaching, I try to do stuff like that at least occasionally, because I think it does give an on-ramp for students that are more intimidated by just lines and lines of math.
I think those are such good points. A few things. First of all, peer instruction, the ability for them to interact with each other and help each other figure it out. Oftentimes the instructor who's an expert has a blind spot in terms of how an introductory beginning mind would need to understand the concepts, but also just so much about what you were saying, just like it makes so much sense in terms of, math and other subjects not being just about solving that problem, but about being new ways of thinking. And really, if professors are able to scaffold in kind of problem sets that really focus on the process itself, and they're actually even maybe being assessed more on the processes that they're using rather than on the final product, if they get it right or not, that might be an invitation into more curiosity and inquiry. So I just want to share this again, just so that y'all can see that this is here for us, which is the mindset matters, just these 4 things. And the first thing is, something that we're already doing, and everybody can inspire, each other to do, and our faculty friends we work with, just to inspire that belief in everyone's ability. And that's just something that people, can bring in every interaction they have. And then, the sharing your stories thing, that's a really humanizing thing. We did it in our group, and I feel like it really connected us and made it real and relevant to us. So even asking students to do that, and even just going into that brain plasticity thing and explaining how the neuroscience works, and be like, oh, wow, that is how my brain works. Cool. I didn't realize that. That's awesome. And then, just the last part about what we've already been talking about, of kind of how to scaffold in your instruction. So feel free to add to this document, to use what's in this document in whatever ways you can with your faculty and with your students you work with. And please come to our next session. It's going to be in a month. I don't remember exactly which chapter it is we're reading, but it's all on the poster. And I know it's we have a minute left, but just open up the floor if anyone has any last thoughts or anything you'd like to share before we wrap up.
Our next session is April 6th, and I believe we are reading one of the chapters on motivation, specifically how to increase motivation and engagement in the classroom.
Nice. Well, that'll be fun. We hope to see you all there. Definitely invite your faculty colleagues and everyone else to join us, and we'll send out this recording when we've edited out all the awkward parts. And thanks again, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, y'all. Woohoo!
Awesome. That was great.
I'm going to stop recording.
So fun. Also,